Welcome everybody to a very special episode of CPAC Live. We are here on the Team Trump bus, and we're driving around the great state of Nevada with two people you know very well. First of all, our board member, Adam Laxalt, the former Attorney General from Nevada, whose grandfather was on the board of the ACU. How cool was that? His grandfather obviously was one of Ronald Reagan's best friends in the whole world, and part of CPAC's whole history dovetailed with Ronald Reagan's national political career. So great to be with you, Adam.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And Rick Grenell, who needs no introduction, a freedom fighter who took on the swamp and the deep state and brought truth to light, and really in many ways allowed Donald Trump, right, this ability to explain to the American people what actually happened to him under the previous administration. And getting the truth out there has been an amazing thing. So thank you, Rick, for your courage and for all you do.
And for my socks.
And for your socks. Those are very special. We have you seated in that spot, so check really show off me.
Hey, and you can't sleep on the tennis shoes either. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Very nice.
I got these to wear in Berlin.
Yeah,
so that when I walked around,
yeah,
people would be like, hey, those are American shoes.
That's awesome.
I'm an American.
That's awesome. So as we go around Nevada, what we're finding is what you find in a lot of places around the country. If you're not in New York City, if you're not in the swamp, if you're not in LA, is these wonderful people that feel great about their country. They love their president. They love the policies that have made their lives better. They're looking at what's going on in their country, and they're really worried. But it's great to see the enthusiasm. So Adam, this is where you live. People would say, why are you wasting your time in Nevada? You know, he lost it last time. People assume he lost it by a lot. He didn't. And obviously the news is filled with Democrats trying to do everything they can to, I would say, in an inappropriate way, try to take this state away from us. What's your take on what's going on in Nevada?
Well, I would just say that Nevada has historically been this great, libertarian, Western state. It was sort of the opposite of the California ethos, and even Democrats had to be very, very moderate. What was created out of the desert in Las Vegas is just this shrine to hard work and capitalism and risk, and it was a really core part of the identity of this state. And just in the last 2 to 4 years, you see this large lurch to the left. And unfortunately, I lost my race for governor, which meant they have a governor in both houses. In fact, they're 1 seat away from 2 supermajorities. That's how blue my state went.
We went and saw where the governor lives yesterday, which was an interesting stop on the tour.
That was hard for me to see and not have you inside the governor's mansion. I just want you to know that was a moment where I was
But I do want to say,
oh, this is terrible.
Rick, I want to say, which I thought was great, was one of the security guards at the governor's mansion, which has a...
Don't get him in trouble. Don't get him fired.
I'm not going to say his name, but he could walk out and seem to be appreciative of our signage. And we've seen this at almost every stop.
Yeah,
where
the
police
sign said Trump Pence.
Right.
And the security guard at the governor's mansion came over and said, keep it up.
That's right. That's right.
Well, the bottom line is that law enforcement loves the president. Law enforcement is tired of getting kicked in the teeth in this state. We have a governor and an attorney general that don't support the police. They've called our system systemically racist, which is just simply not true. And at a time when police need support to keep us safe, we had a lot of rioting going on in Las Vegas. We had an officer shot. We had the city hall burned down in Reno, which is just kind of unimaginable.
Right.
And rather than back up our law enforcement, and rather than the governor call in the National Guard early, tell law enforcement we're with you, keep the people safe, they sided with the mob. And so law enforcement is pissed. They're tired of getting kicked around.
And there's also what I think problematic. If you take that to the next step, you really do have community 911 and get through to the police in an emergency and have confidence that they are going to arrive and solve the problem. This idea that we would defund the police, I mean, I honestly believe that defunding the police is going to risk 911 services. How are you going to be able to staff up appropriately
That's right.
when you are cutting funding during a time when we're seeing many inner cities across the country
And they're doing the
having rioting and looting of even federal buildings? It's outrageous.
And they're also trying to, at the same time that they're defunding the police. By the way, this isn't just big cities, as you all know. They're doing this in a lot of medium-sized cities. They're doing it in cities in red states too, because somehow that is going to help with racial relations, which none of us believe. And a lot of these cops are, the color of the rainbow. There's a lot of cops, people of color who are in these police forces. But now they're saying they want to take all of our guns too. So it's like, okay, well, the cops aren't going to be there when you call 911 necessarily. Cops have already announced changes in policies. And second of all, like in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're going to make it that much harder for you to actually be able to
Defund and disarm.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
You were an AG.
And you're going to have these radical Soros-backed DAs that are willing to twist the law to prosecute that couple that was defending their home in St.
St.
Louis.
Louis.
I mean, I'm
Their
telling
home.
you,
Did you see that their
people were
gate was
terrified.
broken?
Oh no, this is a peaceful protest.
But actually, it's like the Covington kid, Mr. Sandman, Nick Sandman. They showed the video of these two people going out on the front porch, armed. One with an AK-47, the other one.
It's the same thing. You're exactly right.
The woman probably inappropriately, she didn't necessarily have a lot of firearms training, but she was scared. But they didn't show you the beginning part of
It's
the video.
her property.
They broke down her gate and were
Yeah.
going for her house.
Yes.
I mean, that part of the video conveniently gets edited out, and then it looks like these two people are almost encouraging, a problem. It's problematic when you can't turn on the television and get this.
Get accurate
You get accurate news.
Yeah.
Well, people were legitimately scared in a place like Reno, where this kind of thing doesn't happen often. When you had those first few days of rioting, people are taking their guns out. They're prepared. Who's going to defend them?
This is what I think that we've been seeing over the last 2 days. When you talk to people saying, yeah, I'm for Trump, but I'm going to start speaking up more. That there is this silent majority. There are a whole bunch of people who are there and afraid to say to their neighbor, I'm going to vote for Trump. But I feel like what we've seen over the last 2 days, people are getting a little bit tired of it. And they're beginning to step up and say, I need the direction of our country to go towards capitalism, towards the rule of law. And what I see from Joe Biden is that he has such a weakness to stand up to these people. Let's be very clear. Those people that are looting and rioting are Joe Biden supporters.
That's right.
He has the ability to say to them,
But he hasn't.
knock it off.
But he hasn't.
Knock it off. Right. He won't.
He'll
And
do it.
he told us that the last person that leaves the room on all policy decisions for him is going to be Kamala Harris. So that makes me a little bit concerned that if she's the last person
Just a
out,
little bit.
if she's the last person out of the room, we have to make sure that the public knows that she's the most liberal senator. She ran in my state of California as the craziest left progressive in Sacramento. She's never been vetted by the Sacramento media because they don't exist. We have a one-party state in California and a cheerleading media that never vet these people. And so when they come onto the national stage, they should be vetted. However, she dropped out in 2019 for president. Nobody really
She did terrible.
and nobody really took her that seriously to vet her enough. There were some who were doing hit jobs from the Democratic
She
side.
was out of that race so quickly, right?
Yeah.
That she's
never been vetted.
She really didn't get the full national scrutiny. And you said the most liberal senator on our ACU ratings. She has a 0. She didn't vote right on any major issue. And now look, that's a bigger trend in this new socialist Democrat party. But she is as radical as you say. And you know this because she's from your state.
Yeah, and look, somebody needs to go and look at her record and check
taken the model of Rally, which was wonderful. It's almost like a spiritual thing if you haven't done it. It's so much fun. You meet so many great people, but because of what we're dealing with, that can't be. And not only are they trying to stop rallies, they're actually trying to stop schools. They're trying to stop churches. They're trying to stop everything because they actually think that helps Joe Biden. But what the campaign's doing is just breaking up into smaller groups and hitting every one of these battleground states, which I know the people that we've been talking to on the road, they want to get out of their house. They want to have this presidential campaign. They want to fight for what they believe in. They're very emotional about what they feel. But my takeaway from Nevada, not only have I not seen a cop walk away from it, but when we show up, because we're showing up a little, we're not a little on the bootleg, we're not doing anything wrong, but let's just say the authorities in the state.
It's authentic, let's say that.
It's spontaneous, how about that? The authorities in the state of Nevada would like us to probably not be here at all, and we had to cancel our CPAC West, and we had to cancel the wonderful Bass Fry because they've changed so many of the rules. So the cops all join us. Tell the CPAC community what exactly is going on as fast as you can, why this mail-in voter thing that's going on in the state is such a problem.
Yeah, first, thanks to the president that he's elevated this very important issue. Every person, as you guys noticed, the first thing they ask about what in the world is going on with our election. But the bottom line is they went on a Friday night. They called a special emergency session inside of 100 days to an election
at the state legislature.
At the state legislature, it's the governor and 2 Democrat houses, and they just ran through a full transformation of our system. And we have been a in-person election in 16 and 18, and 94 and 95% of the people voted in person, and they want to switch us to a universal mail election. And so people are incredibly worried. Obviously, security is a big issue, but one of the biggest issues is the rolls. And there was the breaking news story out of Las Vegas Review-Journal that over 200,000 ballots from the primary just in the greater Las Vegas area bounced back as undeliverable. 100,000 of those were active registered voters. And I'll remind our CPAC audience that the president lost by 26,000 votes.
How many votes a precinct?
14 votes a precinct.
That's nothing.
And so, are we worried that people are going to trust the results? Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question on that real fast? So, if you turn on your television today, you're going to see on all the networks. By the way, you're going to hear this. That the reason why we have to vote by mail is because of the virus, and people are worried about getting sick if they vote. Of course, they can go to Target and they can go to Home Depot, and that's fine. But if you vote, apparently you will get sick. But why is that not true? Always look at the pattern. The Democrats started in California. They actually started in Oregon, Washington, California. The blueprint for the Democratic Party is to move away from in-person voting and move to mail-in only voting. That's what they want. So why did they pass this in other states if it was about the epidemic? And they did this years ago. This is their battle plan because they know that once you have a lot of ballots out there that won't get filled out, maybe go to the wrong addresses, and then you add this third party that can pick them up, that's a big problem.
It's so sloppy, honestly, that if this was happening in another country, the State Department would condemn the election. Literally.
So would all the human rights groups.
Right. They would say, no, it's uncontrolled, it's sloppy, the error rate is way too high. We would have election observers that would say this is unacceptable.
Inside of 90 days to transform an election for presidential in a clear swing state.
Get outraged.
We have never done universal mail. And what we try to hammer home, those of us that speak on this issue.
We believe in your right to vote by mail if you want to. There's nothing wrong with
Absentee.
that. You ask for it. The local election official checks your name against the file. They see if you're in there multiple times. They're able to update your file so that you only get one ballot, right? And then you want to have a postmark on that ballot so that someone can't vote after the election day because they might see that you're 1,000 votes behind and we got to find 1,000 votes, which, God forbid, has happened in this country over the last 250 years, mostly by Democrats like Lyndon Baines Johnson. But it has happened. And so you want that postmark because that adds to security, right? And you want to make sure that nobody can fill that ballot out. So you don't want a third party picking up that ballot.
I think
that
we also
empty
need to
ballot.
be very clear that if you are in this country illegally and you vote, it's a crime.
Yeah, let's get rid.
It's a crime, and we should make sure that people
Well,
are prosecuted.
It's a felony to vote illegally.
Yes.
Just in general, so that would absolutely apply to illegal voting illegally.
Which would be talking about foreign interference in our elections.
There you go. But and here's the thing: we always talked about needing an ID to vote. We're so much beyond that now. I mean, we and unfortunately, in a lot of these socialist states, we've lost that fight on an ID. And
We
now,
have no voter ID.
right? But now it's even worse. Now it's like you're setting up a scenario where other people can vote for a name on that roll.
I have to say that the voter ID thing, I'm not letting go because normal, regular people are like, of course you should have an ID to
Yeah.
vote.
I have to
It's
have-
only the media and these crazy.
I love it when you do an interview, Rick, on CNN or MSNBC or one of these television stations. You literally need an ID to get past the lobby security guard, and then you might need an ID to get like on the elevator, and then you do an interview where they make you sound like you're a racist or like
I-
an anti-immigrant for saying you should have an ID to vote.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's ironic.
Yeah, it's. I'm not letting it go because
No.
I really do believe that normal people think, well, of course you have to have an ID to vote. And the first person who just comes out and says, I don't care what the media says, I don't care what the radicals who want to try to spin an election do. We think that you should absolutely have to have an ID to make sure that you are who you say you are. And by the way, if you want an absentee ballot, you request it, even doing it digitally, and we'll send it to you.
And I love how the press tries to make it sound they're lying about two things, most of them. They're saying, oh, well, the president votes by mail and Kayleigh McEnany votes by mail. And of course, they either don't understand or they don't want to understand that
They
once
purposely
again,
blur
right,
it.
voting early, voting absentee, the Republicans have always had big, vigorous programs. But the fact is most of the time Republicans vote on election day. And Democrats know that. Democrats are able to, because of the nature of their coalition of supporters, they're able to have easier programs to collect a bunch of ballots. It's a lot harder for Republicans. You know, what's ironic about Republicans is we're so individualistic that we just kind of live everywhere and live our lives. Like, we don't live together. So to try to collect all those ballots for Republicans is always harder. And by the way, we're very rural too. Like this beautiful part of the desert we're driving through, although I don't see many houses at it. But the fact is that if you have a lot of supporters in the rural community, the idea of picking up a lot of ballots is more difficult. The second lie, though, which I think we should talk about, is this postal lie. Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, did a great job yesterday because just so happens that was the subcommittee on the government reform committee. Just know this: the post office is not being denied a red cent of funding by President Trump. Not a red cent. What the post office and its allies are asking for is extra emergency money because of the virus. Now, why the virus has resulted in them needing these extras of millions of dollars, we could do a whole show on. The fact is they lose billions of dollars every year, and every government entity and every nonprofit, let's face it, around this country has their hand out. They're going to use this opportunity to try to have a big, Nancy Pelosi said she wanted a nearly $4 trillion bill, and it's Republicans saying that's kind of ridiculous. Let's help small business owners. Let's help Americans who might not be able to go to work.
By the
But
way,
to use this as an opportunity to give a slush fund to the post office has nothing to do with this question of mail-in voting.
But, my attitude about the post office is of course it's important. Of course it's elderly people rely on it.
Hey, then I'm elderly because I pay my bills the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Stamp, write a check.
But the reality is that we live in a world now where we have to demand that government programs are reformed, that they are kept up with the times. And the post office
You
just
mean it
hasn't-
doesn't run like a top? That's what they're acting like right now.
Right.
That it's Trump that somehow
right.
is dismantling
And Adam,
the
they have
USPS.
these, it's kind of like when they did the cages at the southern border, the cages that Barack Obama bought and assembled, and then they used the video from when Barack Obama was president
To blame
Trump for putting kids in cages. It's the same thing here. They have this video on TV with these post office boxes being loaded on, trucks, and they're like, Trump is going to make it impossible for you to mail your ballot. Just so you all understand, as Mark Meadows described the other day, this is a reform plan put in place by the Obama administration and the previous Postmaster General, because they got to take steps to make sure that they don't lose billions of dollars every year.
Well, go to my Twitter feed and see the video that I put out of President Obama critiquing the post office.
It's awesome.
And being basically negative about the fact that it's not reformed. They just can't help themselves. They've got Trump derangement syndrome. And so every issue is to blame Trump, no matter what the facts are.
So, guys, we've had a lot. I've had a lot of fun on the bus. I'm going to let them say they might not like me being on the bus, but it's just the way they got the bad card and the luck of the draw. But at the ACU, we're moving quickly into this program, America versus Socialism. We're going to have a whole political program in battleground states, talking to conservative voters, and not just conservative voters, just people love America. That's our theme. A little bit as we close out this interview, Adam, do you think this whole idea of socialism in America, do you think it's overblown, or do you think it's a real threat?
I think we've seen the face of the left this year. We've seen it in a lot of different ways, and what I hear around Nevada is people are scared. People are scared that Nevada and our country may never be the same again if we lose this election. The interesting thing about Nevada is that, especially Las Vegas, is it's a capitalist mecca, and the more opportunity people have, the more people grow. We've been one of the fastest growing cities, one of the fastest economic booms, and people are not going to be with socialism. People have gone from the lowest to the highest in this city because we've embraced this free market system. And so I think it presents a great contrast, and President versus Biden presents a very unique contrast here. We were the hardest hit by the last recession. We took the longest to dig out of the Obama-Biden recovery, the long, slow recovery. And so the voters in Las Vegas and across our state, they already know what a Biden recovery is like. We won't survive a Biden recovery in this state. It takes 4 years.
I don't think he is either.
Could be. And what we do know is that the president said, I'm bringing America back tomorrow.
Right.
And he did. And Nevada has been booming under
But
President
the
Trump.
point on the America versus Socialism thing, too, is it's not necessarily the standard Republican versus Democrat fight. No. We have the ability to get a lot of people on our cause, on our side, because they actually think cops are needed, and they think America has been a beautiful country, warts and all.
They love their country.
That's right.
They love their flag. They love the national anthem. They love, look.
They used to love baseball. They used to love football. They used to love all this because it was a place where we could kind of come together as a country and see what we held in common. And saying the pledge was important. There was one national anthem because it bound us together.
I'm hearing from so many. I heard this for 2 years in Germany when I was there, and I'm hearing from so many people now that our election has ramped up. Europeans say you in America must stand firm for capitalism. Don't go the way that we did. We can't peel it back. If America falls away from capitalism, the last bastion, then there is no hope for us fighting back in Europe. It's going to get worse for us in Europe. That's what I'm hearing constantly from people in Europe, to say, fight hard in this election, stand firm, because if you can win and you can beat back socialism and capitalism wins, we have a chance to claw back and have capitalism return to Europe. I'm a big believer, I just have to say this because otherwise this is going to go negatively viral in Europe. I'm a big believer in the transatlantic relationship. We have to have our European allies. But for too long, our European allies have gone adrift, and they have moved away from the West. They have
and some of you came with us on our CPACs overseas. This is a bit to thumbnail for us, not through government channels, is a lot of people overseas really love this country because they know in the end, not just Donald Trump being that backstop, but America being that backstop for these important values. And we see this being played out in Hong Kong, which is really tragic. I appreciate you guys joining us. This has been a great bus tour. I hope we get to do it again. We just got done with.
We're going to do it for the whatever office Adam runs for.
That's a deal. That's a deal. And I have a couple ideas on that front.
I do
but
too.
We just
Get your
did,
checkbook out.
That's right. That's right. Mercy and I are on board. We just did CPAC Wisconsin, which obviously you guys got to watch live stream, and some of you were able to join us. And our next CPAC is going to be in Pennsylvania, and Charlie Jerome's taking the lead on putting a great event together there. We're going to be in all these battleground states. We'll keep you posted on where you're going to be. Check your email, because we're going to be talking to you about this campaign of America versus socialism. We believe that if we can stop socialism dead in its tracks by re-electing Donald Trump and getting Kevin McCarthy more Republicans in the House, and keeping that important Senate majority for the Republican Party so that Donald Trump can keep picking these great judges, we can make sure that America is going to have a great future. And as the father of 5 kids, it's very important for all of us who are bringing kids into this world. We want them to have a great country. I think we can do it. So let's all work together to get it done. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Talk to you all soon.
What I want to hear from Joe Biden is not how crummy America is, but what he wants to do to improve America. And I think that's what they're failing to do at this convention. It's because they don't know whether they're a socialist party or whether they're this more moderate party that Karl Rove described. You can't have it both ways, and I think that's the problem for Joe Biden. And when you have Tim Ryan literally saying...
Finish.
Yeah, just to finish, Bill, when you have Tim Ryan, who ran for the presidency on the Democratic ticket, saying that it's because Joe Biden is in a weakened state, it really brings a lot of questions to the table.
It's good to be with you on CPAC Live. I'm Dan Schneider, the Executive Director of ACU. We've got 75 days or so before the next presidential election, and we just got some wild information. The governor of New Jersey is mailing ballots to every single New Jersey voter, every single one. What is disturbing is that every single one of these voters can cast their mail-in ballot, and then the very next day show up at a polling station and cast another ballot, and there's nothing that can be done. Instead, we have to just trust that these good people who have spent all their time trying to remove a duly elected president from office, that we'll just trust them not to break the law. We'll just trust them not to do what is illegal, but impossible to catch. So what could go wrong? Well, we've got 2 guests who are going to help us understand what could go wrong, because it already has gone wrong. We've got Gordon Chang, who is both an ACU board member and a well-known writer and TV commentator from America. And we've got Beng Mao, who is one of the best-known writers, critics, and thought leaders in South Korea. They have studied the Korean elections that took place just in April 15th. And by all accounts, the president, the radical left-wing president of South Korea, stole the election. Beng Mao, could you please tell us what happened?
Yeah, in short, a very sophisticated set of a computer server and QR code and a Huawei firewall and a very sophisticated server-grade ballot counting machine, electronic counting machine. These things were used to, how can I say, fabricated or steal about 7 to 10% of the vote during the universal early voting. It is suspected.
I want to just interrupt you there. 7 to 10% of the vote was stolen in this nationwide election.
It is suspected by a U.S. professor, a very famous doctor, Dr. Walter Mebane.
Right. If our viewers are interested, Dr. Walter Mebane at the University of Michigan did this work. He doesn't know anything about Korean politics. He doesn't know anything about Korean policy. He is a numbers guy, and he monitors elections all over the world, hundreds of thousands of elections he's monitored.
That's right.
So he got the data sets from the Korean election, and to his amazement, it was 7 to 10% of the election was stolen.
That's right.
Bang Mao, you mentioned Huawei. Gordon Chang, you are somebody who knows what Huawei is about more than almost anybody else on this planet. Gordon, what did Huawei do? What are they capable of? And maybe we can also start thinking about what happened in Korea and how that might impact the U.S. election.
Yeah. Huawei Technologies is the world's leading maker of telecom equipment and is basically owned by China by 99%, 1% by a private individual. Huawei is China's instrument to dominate 5G, the fifth generation of wireless communications. More important for this purpose, China's used Huawei to surveil others around the world. And in this case, they've not only used it to surveil what was going on in South Korea, they used Huawei technology and servers to steal that 7 to 10% of the vote. So we believe that Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, worked with the Communist Party, worked with perhaps Tencent, which is a private Chinese company, and they worked also with Huawei Technologies. And that's how Beijing was able to develop this software that in the middle of an election changed 7%, 10% of the ballots.
Yeah, so Tencent, most Americans probably don't know that company, but Tencent owns TikTok, right?
Yes, that's right.
Tencent owns WeChat, which
WeChat.
President Trump has put under ban. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is another Chinese company. ByteDance and Tencent are very similar. They are internet giants.
Well, sir, back to the Korean perspective. Why would President Moon Jae-in do this, and how did he do it? How did he work with the Chinese to get this done?
Actually, I don't have a very concrete evidence. We don't. It is all kind of a suspicion right now. So I have to keep my reservation with regard to that. But still, back in the July of 2019, and I look like a Biden. Sorry, 2019. Okay. And the head of one of the key member of the ruling party went to Beijing and made a agreement with the Chinese Communist Party, and it's very strange. It is a policy partnership agreement. July 2019 is by that time everybody knows that there's a civilization war between China and U.S. Is going to end up with the victory of U.S. It was very clear to almost everybody. And still, this guy went to Beijing. And
are you referring to Yang Jong-chul? Is he the individual? Well, he is notorious for being very pro North Korea and very anti-American. So he's the guy that the South Korean president sent to the Chinese Communist Party to work out this deal.
Yes, the ruling party sent him. He is the head of the ruling party's think tank, which is called the Democracy Institute.
So now the Chinese are involved in the Korean elections. They've got their hardware. Gordon, 5G, Huawei, what could go wrong in the U.S. elections here?
Well, what could go wrong is what we saw in South Korea is that they manipulated electronic voting machines. Now, a number of many U.S. votes are recorded on those electronic voting machines. So, for instance, the last time that I voted, 2016 presidential election, it was on an electronic machine. And what we're concerned about is that these machines, some of them have indirect links with Chinese equipment suppliers. And, with Beijing perfecting its techniques in South Korea, it could try something else. We worry about mail-in ballots, as you just point out. And by the way, I am from New Jersey. And one thing I'm going to do, Dan, is Lydia and I, my wife, we're going to actually go and get absentee ballots. We're going to fill them in. We're going to deliver them on the spot because we are concerned about election fraud. But sorry for that. But what China could do is with those electronic machines, which are in New Jersey, they could just change votes like they did in South Korea. Remember, their software to do this in South Korea changed votes in the middle of an election. It figured out which elections, because there were 300 seats up for grabs on April 15th in the National Assembly. They figured out which seats they should try to change, which they could change, and they changed them instantaneously. So if they can do that in South Korea, why can't they do that in the United States? So we've got to be extremely concerned because we know that China's been thinking about our election infrastructure.
Well, Bing Mao,
Yes.
we're going to put a picture up on the screen where bundles of ballots were put in like kiosks, voting kiosks in Korea, and every single one of these ballots were voted for the ruling party. Obviously, there was additional voting fraud that didn't relate to high technology. It was just straight rampant fraud. Can you explain how that would have happened in Korea?
You mean, yeah, it is essentially it is a very high-tech electronic kiosk. You know, we Koreans do have a very accurate resident registration, very, very accurate one. And they are using it. And so everybody can, anybody can go to one of the polling places, which is about 4,000 all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Not to his address, not to the one which is in his address. No, any place. So it is actually a kiosk. Still, it provides you with paper ballots.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you a false feeling that it is a real, conventional, traditional voting. But essentially, it is electronic voting.
Well, in some respects, it actually sounds a little bit like what the New Jersey governor is doing and what other governors here in America are talking about doing. Just sending out, you'll get something in the mail, it's paper, and you can vote it. But what if you've got 5 people in your family and you get 5 ballots? Or what if you're in a house, you've moved into a house and you get a whole bunch of ballots, from other apartment owners in the house? And I mean, Gordon, how are we going to prevent this kind of fraud that we saw in Korea just in April?
Yeah, mail-in ballots are really an invitation for fraud, and especially with what we've seen in prior elections in this country, this is not some theoretical concern. I just want to mention, in South Korea, this was an election for the National Assembly. The National Assembly, in the first instance, gets to approve a constitution. Moon Jae-in is just 3 votes short of being able to get a constitutional amendment through the National Assembly. And the reason why this is important is because if Moon can do what he wants, he probably would do away with the Republic of Korea, South Korea. He'd merge it into North Korea. Because of this fraud, he's only 3 votes short of being able to end the existence of South Korea. That's why this fraud is so consequential. And of course, Dan, November 3, this election is so consequential for the United States. So China clearly has the incentive to change the election results as they did in South Korea, and as I'm sure they're going to try and do in the United States.
Well, we started this segment off explaining that what happened in Korea could be a precursor to what could happen in our own elections. Bing Mao, how are the Korean people responding to all of this evidence of fraud?
Actually, this government is totally controlling every sector of the media, and shamefully, the Korean learned people, the intellectuals, are not strong enough. So, actually, those people like me who are criticizing before the election and after the election, there's a system. Before the election, I criticized the system itself, and after the election, I raised the issue of election rigging. And these people are prosecuted. For me, I'm being prosecuted. Right. Because they say that I instigated election crime, organized election crime for criticizing the system.
Right.
And
For asking questions.
So we are being marginalized. Still, there are lawyers, and still there are activists. Still, there are big demonstrations against this election rigging, but it's an uphill struggle.
Well, Bing Mao, I hope that this University of Michigan professor who crunched all the numbers and shows that and I think the language he says is that, well, in fact, I can quote, there are anomalies that strongly suggest the Korean 2020 legislative election was fraudulently manipulated. You know, this is one of America's finest statisticians who specializes in election fraud all over the world. And, you know, it's unequivocal. Something weird happened in Korea. And now you're being prosecuted in a criminal court for saying exactly what this University of Michigan professor is saying.
Yes, that's right. And for warning, this system can be, fatally rigged before the election. For warning it.
Yes. Well, one thing we know about the left, whether we're talking about the left in America or we're talking about the left throughout the world, they weaponize the court system against their political opponents. I might have a disagreement with somebody. We can debate. We have an election, and the person who convinces the electorate is supposed to win, and the other person is supposed to lose. But the loser is not supposed to go to jail. Yet we see the left in America trying to criminalize disagreement, just like we see in South Korea and other places.
Yes, it has happened here. You said I think they are trying to build a Orwellian totalitarian control all over the country throughout all the sectors. I think that Xi Jinping is a inspiration to them.
Well, Bing Mao and Gordon, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We have seen the same sort of thing happening in Hong Kong. The person we think of as the greatest patriot on earth, the greatest freedom fighter on earth, Jimmy Lai, he's now been arrested. He's been imprisoned. He's now out on bail. But there's a serious threat that he'll be taken to China, tortured, imprisoned, and who knows what else. The same fights here in America are the same fights elsewhere. It is about freedom versus the radical left. So as we approach November 3rd, let's keep in mind we have got to fight for freedom. Thank you all. This has been another edition of CPAC Live.